So we dealt with BP, pulse. The next thing will be respiratory rate. So respiratory rate, you have to comment like whether it's thoracoabdominal or abdominothoracic, and rate of the respiration, which doesn't have much significance. The next thing, temperature. So whether the patient is febrile or not. Fever is one of the signs for infective endocarditis. So if you are mentioning fever, you should be very sure that if the patient has infective endocarditis, usually even when there is a patient has a fever, you won't have to comment on that, because they'll get into questions of infective endocarditis. So next thing will be, the most important thing is JVP. You don't have to measure JVP in other cases, but JVP should be measured in this case only when it is elevated. So if there is no elevation of JVP, there is no point in for you guys to measure the normal JVP and all. See whether you can see the blue column between the two heads of the sternocleidomastoid. If there is increase in the blue column, or if there is increase in some pulsation, if you see any pulsation over the over that area, you can say that the patient could have increase in JVP, so you can go and measure about it. So you know how to measure, but you should know what JVP looks like. So JVP looks something like this. Okay, so this is the A wave, this is the C wave, X descent, Y descent, V wave, and again A wave. This is how a normal JVP will be there. Okay, so A wave is nothing but due to atrial contraction. C wave is due to, actually first they thought it was due to a carotid impingement, but recently they have said that carotid impingement is not the cause for increase in for the deflection of C wave. The C wave is actually due to tricuspid valve bulge. Tricuspid valve bulge into the right atrium. Then X descent. Why there is X descent is due to the relaxation of the ventricle and filling of relaxation of the right atrium. So X descent is due to relaxation of the right atrium and decrease in pressure. Then V wave is due to inflow like the blood from the SVC is going into the right atrium. Y descent is due to opening of the tricuspid, right atrium to right ventricle, blood is going, and then again atrial kick. This is nothing but atrial kick. So if you know about cardiac cycle, you can easily correlate with this. First there will be atrial, so consider this is the heart, so first there will be contraction of the atrium. So there will be contraction of the atrium, the blood will go like, the contraction of the atrium will be given by atrial kick, A wave of the JVP. After contraction, the next step will be isometric contraction of the right ventricle and left ventricle, and this isometric contraction of the right ventricle and left ventricle can present with isometric contraction of the right ventricle and left ventricle pushes the tricuspid valve into the right atrium, leading to ballooning, and this leads to a sudden increase in pressure inside, leading to something called a C wave. And after that there will be relaxation of the right atrium. So after pumping, the right atrium goes for relaxation. Since the right atrium goes for relaxation, there is X descent, and then there is flow of blood from the superior vena cava into the right atrium, leading to increase in pressure inside, which leads to V wave. And then there will be there will be opening of the tricuspid valve, and there will be flow of blood from the right atrium to the right ventricle, which is called as Y descent. Again the cycle repeats. So this is actually the normal JVP. The alterations in the JVP which you should know is absent A wave. So the condition in which there won't be, the atrial contraction will not be so good enough. So in atrial fibrillation there is continuous fibrillatory activities but not well enough to give a atrial contraction good, not strong enough to give a good elevation or a good wave in the JVP. So atrial fibrillation, absent A wave. There is Cannon A waves, which is a large A wave when it is contracting against the dissociated heart. So in case of an AV dissociation, since the ventricle and atrium are not in synchrony, the ventricle is not in a relaxed manner to receive the blood. So when the atrium contracts against the already contracted ventricle, which is not in synchrony, dyssynchrony, leading to Cannon A waves. Or when the atrium contracts against a closed tricuspid valve. In case of a tricuspid atresia, a tricuspid stenosis, you will get a large A wave. Tricuspid stenosis, tricuspid atresia. So there is something called as CV wave. CV wave is nothing but there is absent Y X descent. Why there is absent X descent? What is actually X descent? X descent is a relaxation of the right atrium. The condition in which there is no relaxation of the right atrium, there is no decrease in blood pressure inside the right atrium during this phase, tricuspid regurgitation. So since actually when the ventricle goes for contraction, the atrium goes for relaxation. So when the ventricle goes for contraction, the blood from the ventricle to the atrium is prevented by the tricuspid valve in this case. So since the tricuspid valve is not functioning enough, the blood goes from the ventricle to the atrium. So when the blood goes from the ventricle to the atrium, the relaxation of the atrium doesn't happen very good. So there is increase in pressure inside the atrium, leading to something called as CV wave, which is there is absent X descent. So it will come like this: C and V joins with each other. There is absent X descent. This thing is seen in tricuspid regurgitation. And the same thing is going to happen in cardiac tamponade. In cardiac tamponade, there will be absent X descent and Y descent. In case of a constrictive pericarditis, there will be steep Y descent. So steep Y descent is seen in constrictive pericarditis. In constrictive pericarditis, the compliance of the atrium is maintained. That's why you are getting steep Y descent in constrictive pericarditis. But absent Y descent is seen in cardiac tamponade. So this is something to do with the JVP. I gave a small brief discussion about what is JVP and all. So if you want to know about JVP, you can go to your books and see about it. So I just gave you a overview of what is a JVP. These are the questions which they will be asking, and usually they won't go outside this thing. Then they will be asking something called as Lancisi sign and Fredrickson sign. You can go to your books and see about it. Okay, we dealt with the JVP. The next thing that we need to pay attention are the markers. Those are the things that we need to make sure the patient has, which will give you some idea to the diagnosis with which the patient has. Specifically, if the patient has aortic regurgitation, the peripheral signs are the things to go, usually the patient will be kept with the peripheral signs in order for you guys to identify and report it to the examiner. So that is the way to find out an aortic regurgitation case more often than less. So we'll get into the markers. So markers of cardiovascular system. So what are the markers of cardiovascular system? So we have to go into the conditions which can cause cardiovascular diseases. The most common condition which can cause cardiovascular disease is due to rheumatic fever, causing rheumatic heart disease. So the markers of rheumatic fever, either you have to memorize Jones criteria, or we'll go with the symptoms and then go with the criteria. It's better to go with the criteria first. We'll learn the criteria, and there has been a small change in the criteria recently. Not so recently, in 2015 there is a change. So the criteria with which rheumatic heart disease or rheumatic fever is categorized is with Jones criteria. Now it is called as modified Jones criteria. So first we'll get to know what is Jones criteria, and then we'll go into modified Jones criteria. So Jones criteria, the things which are included under Jones criteria are, as I already told, Jones criteria: joint involvement, N for nodules, E for erythema marginatum, S for Sydenham-scoria, C for carditis, which is nothing but pancarditis. So joint involvement is nothing but migratory polyarthritis. It's more like a polyarthralgia than an arthritis. So Jones criteria is divided into major criteria and minor criteria. The major criteria includes all these 5 things, and the minor criteria includes fever, arthralgia, elevated ESR, elevated CRP, ESR or CRP, and there is prolonged PR interval. So we have 5 minor criteria. So this is the Jones criteria with which we diagnose patients, and now Jones criteria have been changed to modified Jones criteria. So modified Jones criteria is nothing, actually it is not that much difficult to memorize. If you memorize Jones criteria, it is easy to memorize modified Jones criteria. Modified Jones criteria, it is based on low risk population and high risk population. It is based on low risk population and high risk population. So the same things will come here too, same major criteria and same minor criteria with little change. In high risk patient, even a monoarthritis or monoarthralgia carries significance, while in low risk patient only polyarthritis is considered to be significant. So only if there is a polyarthritis in a low risk population corresponds to a major criteria compared to a monoarthritis seen in high risk population. Same way, in minor criteria, there is a change in fever temperature too. The temperature of the fever will be 38.5 degrees Celsius in more than 38.5 degrees Celsius in case of a low risk area, and it is just more than 38 degrees Celsius in case of a high risk patient. So, and then there is something called in ESR too, when the ESR is more than 60 mm in 1 hour in low risk. In high risk, even if there is increase in 30 mm per hour, it is considered to be significant. All these things should be there, plus a definitive diagnostic thing. Definitive diagnostic of group A beta hemolytic streptococcus infection. Without this criteria, you cannot make a diagnosis of rheumatic heart disease. This criteria can be diagnosed with the throat swab throat swab on gram staining or throat swab on culture showing group A beta hemolytic streptococcus, or ASO titer can be run. Even DNAs can be run, anti-DNAs. So this is the Jones criteria, and this is about rheumatic fever. So markers of rheumatic fever are migratory polyarthritis and subcutaneous nodules, erythema marginatum. Erythema marginatum is nothing but rash, evanescent rash, which are over the bathing area, mostly with a central cleared margin and a peripheral raised margin. Then we have Sydenham scoria, which is mostly a semi-purposeful, involuntary, fast movement, usually involving one side of the body. Then we have carditis, pancarditis, which is also called as bread and butter carditis, which can be seen in echo. Then markers of infective endocarditis. The next thing we should look for is markers of infective endocarditis. So what are the markers of infective endocarditis? So infective endocarditis, how it will present? So we'll go by that way. So it presents with fever, anemia, jaundice, recent change in murmur. This is very characteristic of infective endocarditis. Recent change in murmur, in the quantity or in the intensity. So in the intensity or in the quality. When there is a recent change in murmur, it most probably points out towards the infective endocarditis pathology. The patient will be like very sick if it is an acute bacterial endocarditis. So there will be fever, anemia, jaundice, and there will be something called as painful clubbing and painful splenomegaly. There will be painful clubbing and painful splenomegaly. So these are the markers of endocarditis. The markers of endocarditis, the peripheral markers are, we have something called as oscillar nodes. Oscillar nodes are nothing but they are like painful nodes over the pulp of the fingers. Usually over the pulp there will be something called some painful nodes, which are called as oscillus nodes. And there is something called as Janeway lesion. Janeway lesion are painless plaques or painless elevated rashes present over the palms and soles. And there is something called as splinter hemorrhages. Splinter hemorrhages are present over the nails, like on the base, over the base of the nails. Splinter hemorrhages are due to the emboli which are thrown by the infective endocarditis. The embolic clot goes and dislodges and goes and accumulates in the capillary bed, leading to splinter hemorrhages. And there is Roth spot. Roth spot are nothing but like a hemorrhagic spot over the seen over the fundus of the eye. Roth spot are not specific for infective endocarditis. It's also seen in leukemic patients. So infective endocarditis, these are the markers by which you can go with infective endocarditis. Then you have to go with markers of coronary artery disease or atherosclerosis. So the markers of coronary artery disease or atherosclerosis are xanthoma, xanthelasma, presence of fat or presence of cholesterol over the near the eyelids and all. Those are called as xanthelasma. And xanthoma xanthoma could be over the tendons, which is called as tendon xanthoma, the collection of fat. And then lipemia retinalis, which is seen in hypertriglyceridemic conditions, hypercholesterolemia type 1, hypertriglyceridemia. Lipemia retinalis is nothing but actually when you look into the fundus, you will be able to see milky white retinal vasculature due to increased triglyceride level in the blood, which is called as lipemia retinalis. And the patient might have arteriosclerosis too. So these are the prominent markers for hypercholesterolemia, which can later predispose to coronary artery disease. So the other markers are like the patient, if the patient is obese, obesity is a risk factor for coronary artery disease. So these are the markers for coronary artery disease. So we have obesity, presence of nicotine staining over the palms or over the fingers. And the next thing is arcus senilis, presence of a whitish plaque like thing over the limbus of the eyes, which is seen in old age people, and it is also seen in hypercholesterolemic patients. Arcus senilis. And there is a earlobe sign, which is also called as Frank sign. These patients are more prone to develop acute coronary syndromes. Frank sign, which is a transverse earlobe crease, which is present in some patients, they are more prone to develop coronary artery disease. And the thing which we missed is cyanotic heart disease. Markers of congenital or cyanotic heart disease. Markers of congenital heart disease is nothing but actually we need to go into the syndromes and the teratogenic effects of drugs and maternal infection leading to teratogenic effects. Those things present with a lot of congenital anomalies and congenital heart diseases. So the markers of congenital heart diseases are hypertelorism. There is increased distance between the two eyelids. There is increased intercanthal distance and increased intercameral distance, which is called as hypertelorism. Intercanthal and interpupillary distance, which is called as hypertelorism. And then they have low set ears. The ears will be not in line with the in the normal position. It will be low set, so there will be low set ears. So there could be webbed neck, correspond to Turner's or Noonan's. So if the patient has Turner's, he is more prone to have bicuspid aortic valve, and then he is more prone to have coarctation of aorta. Then after webbed neck, they could have brachydactyly, polydactyly. So in brachydactyly there is a condition called as knuckle dimple knuckle sign. So knuckle dimple knuckle sign is nothing but there is shortened fourth metacarpal. So if you keep like 4 knuckles kept like this, since there is a shortened fourth metacarpal, there will be a dimple rather than a knuckle. So this is called as knuckle dimple knuckle sign, which is characteristic of Turner syndrome. So knuckle dimple knuckle sign needs to be checked out in case of a Turner syndrome. And polydactyly is seen in Down's patients. And other syndromes like other conditions, other presentations like cubitus valgus, which is characteristically seen in Turner syndrome. And there is absent radius. So absent radius, there are a lot of syndromes causing absent radius. One of the syndrome is TAR syndrome, thrombocytopenia absent radius syndrome. They present with atrial septal defects and atrial problems. And there is something called as Hall-Torum syndrome. They can also present with absent radius and atrial septal defects and atrial problems. Hall-Torum syndrome. So Down syndrome can present with endocardial cushion defects, which can present as MR, TR, MS and TS. So the other congenital anomalies you need to check out are web neck, cubitus valgus, absent radius, polydactyly, syndactyly. Syndactyly needs to be checked out. Then coming to the chest, you have to check about pectus excavatum and pectus carinatum. Pectus excavatum is actually it's also called as cobbled chest, cobbler's chest. The sternum is indrawn, so the patient will have indrawn sternum. Pectus excavatum, the condition associated with it is Marfan syndrome. In the patient with Marfan syndrome, they can have both pectus excavatum or pectus carinatum, but pectus excavatum is seen in Marfan syndrome. And there is pectus carinatum, which is seen in rickets. So pectus excavatum, pectus carinatum. So Marfan syndrome patient, they have aortic regurgitation, mitral valve prolapse and dissecting aortic aneurysm. So aortic regurgitation, mitral valve prolapse, dissecting aortic aneurysm. So shield chest needs to be seen in case of a Turner syndrome, and genitals needs to be seen in case abdominal wall hypotonia seen in Down syndrome. Cryptorchidism can be seen in Down syndrome. Hypoplastic testis can be seen. So these are the changes, congenital heart diseases. These are the external markers for congenital heart diseases. And the next thing to be ruled out is syphilis. So the external markers for syphilis are alopecia, loss of hair, Argyll-Robertson pupil, which is also called as prostitute's pupil. So Argyll-Robertson pupil, the characteristic ARP, so accommodation reflex present, light reflex absent. So it is actually due to the obliterative endarteritis of the vasa vasorum, leading to certain changes in the brain, seen in neurosyphilis. Patient has Tavis dorsalis, which is degeneration of the spinal column, dorsal spinal column, leading to positive Romberg sign. You know what Romberg sign is. Then gummatous lesions can be seen, which is nothing but a punched out ulcers. Testicular atrophy can be seen. Then septal perforation can be seen. These are the external markers for syphilis. And skin lesions, chancre like skin lesions can be seen. Skin lesions like chancre, condyloma lata, can be seen in case of syphilis. So we've dealt with history and correlation of history. Examination, general examination, we dealt with all the aspects of general examination. So we've already dealt with all the aspects of history and general examination. The next thing we need to focus on local examination. So as far as now, with the symptom and the general examination, you should be able to narrow down the diagnosis. You should be able to suspect the diagnosis. Like this is the valvular disease that I am going to see about. That's how you should suspect. With the local examination, with the systemic examination, you will get more knowledge about what valvular disease you are dealing about. So that gives you an idea that this is the valvular disease that you are going to deal about, and then you will go for the auscultation to confirm whether it is the valvular disease. And if you go by that way, that is the best way to identify, that is the best way to diagnose a patient without any investigation. So in infective endocarditis, I left something called as echocarditis, which is nothing but only echo findings will be there. No symptoms or signs, only echo finding, which is called as echocarditis. And infective endocarditis is found by, or infective endocarditis is diagnosed by Duke's criteria. Duke's criteria is major and minor, like Jones criteria. Major criteria is nothing but positive blood culture of the common microorganism which causes infective endocarditis, like Staph aureus, Streptococcus viridans, or Hayes group of organisms. Positive blood culture or positive vegetation histopathology. This is a major criteria. And minor criteria includes fever, vascular phenomenon. Vascular phenomenon are splinter hemorrhages, rod spots, or those even rod spots are considered to be immunological. So vascular phenomenon are it could be emboli leading to infective endocarditis clots. So infective endocarditis, embolic strokes, and intestinal angina, infarcts, those are the vascular phenomena. And there is something called immunological phenomena in which the Janeway lesion, ossular nodes, and rod spot come under. Or blood culture which doesn't fit to the major criteria. The major criteria of blood culture is 2 samples taken 12 hours apart should be positive before starting antibiotic. If it doesn't come under this criteria, but you have a suspicion for infective endocarditis, it comes under minor criteria. So this is a Duke's criteria, and I would like to apologize for some changes in my previous video, which is I told about teeth syndrome, which is costochondritis. Actually, it isn't teeth syndrome. It is TITZE, teeth syndrome. E should be joined. This teeth syndrome is an entirely different thing, but this is costochondritis. Okay, we've done with markers of infective endocarditis, markers of rheumatic fever, markers of congenital heart disease, markers of syphilis, and the most important of all, the markers of aortic regurgitation. There are various peripheral markers through which aortic regurgitation can be found out. So we'll go from head to toe. Easier way to memorize. So head. So we have something called as lighthouse sign. So for each systole there will be blanching, as well as there will be erythema, like there will be pulsation for each systole, there will be flushing and blanching for each systole over the forehead, which is called as lighthouse sign. Next one is, we'll get into the eye. We have Landolfi sign. Landolfi sign is nothing but alternating contraction and relaxation of the circular muscles, or contraction relaxation of the sphincters of the eyes. Sphincter of eyes, alternating contraction relaxation with each heartbeat. Landolfi sign. Then Becker sign, which is nothing but retinal artery pulsation, which can be seen through fundoscopy. So we have Landolfi, lighthouse, and Becker. And next into the mouth, so we have Mueller sign or Muller sign. So Muller sign is pulsations are pulsations of the uvula, pulsations of uvula or uvula, that is Muller sign. Then coming to the neck, dancing carotid sign. You can see the carotids dancing actually. If you can see this condition, if you can see this dancing carotid, it looks so interesting. That it looks like the carotids are, for each systole it just pops up and goes back, pops up and goes back, pops up and goes back. So dancing carotid sign. Then we have locomotor brachiae. So this is usually seen over the medial aspect of the arm, over the brachial artery. You can see some pulsation which is called as locomotor brachiae. So medial aspect of arm. Then we have Corrigan pulse or water hammer pulse or collapsing pulse. So it is more like hold the radial artery, look for pulsation, and suddenly lift it up above their head, and you can see the pulsations are dropping down, and pulsations are actually dropping down. You can feel the pulsations are actually dropping down, which is called as water hammer pulse, because the gravity has been eliminated. So during each systole, the pulse will the pulse wave will go and hit the periphery, and it goes back, goes and hits the periphery and goes back. So it will not be sustained enough to give a strong pulse actually. That's why you will get a collapsing pulse in case of a aortic regurgitation patient when the gravity has been eliminated. So the next sign will be Hill sign. This is the most important of all signs in aortic regurgitation. Hill sign will give you the quantitative, or which will give you the severity of the aortic regurgitation. So you need to measure both brachial as well as popliteal, that means upper limb and lower limb pulsation, lower limb blood pressure. So when the difference is 20 to 40, mild AR, 40 to 60, moderate AR. When it is more than 60, it is severe AR, which gives the severity of the AR. So we have Hill sign. Then we have Lincoln sign, which is nothing but pulsatile popliteal artery. Then we have Ashrafian sign. Ashrafian sign, pulsatile pseudoproptosis. Then we have Durozius sign, Durozius murmur. Murmur heard over the popliteal artery. Then we have Traub sign, TRAUB Traub sign, which is pistol shot femorals. And there is another sign which leads to undue prominence of dorsalis pedis artery. Undue prominence of dorsalis pedis artery in a patient more than 75 years is considered to be pathological, which could be a sign of aortic regurgitation. The sign which I left was Quincke sign, which is seen over the nail beds. So it is more like a light bulb flushing and blanching over the nail bed, which is called as Quincke sign. And you can also see some signs like some unnamed signs like earlobe can be blanching, and even you can see earlobes pulsating for each systole. So these signs are corresponding to aortic regurgitation. So mostly if they keep a patient of aortic regurgitation, you will be seeing any one or two of these signs. If you could report those signs to the examiner, they will be very happy, and which will fetch you good marks, and which will fetch you the diagnosis actually more than the marks. And thank you so much. By this we come to the end of general examination, and the next thing to be followed will be local examination and systemic examination. So with this we can almost make the diagnosis. We can at least narrow down the diagnosis to any of the valvular diseases, and then from the local examination we will confirm whether which valvular disease we are dealing about, and before keeping auscultation we will almost confirm, and with the auscultation we will confirm the diagnosis, and then we will present it to the examiner. Thank you so much. See you on the other side.